She's a common voice now, isn't she?
But not as irritating as the ones you get on the sat nav.
Right.
That's true. That's true. So, do you mind if I make you co-host, Eva?
Sure, go ahead.
And Dumi and can help let people in. Otherwise, I get overly distracted.
We'll do that.
It wanted me to confirm I was speaking Portuguese, but I can't speak Portuguese.
Well, I can if you need.
Zoom has got this new thing I don't quite understand yet. So welcome everyone. I hope you've all got a glass of something. I've got a glass of red wine, because some of you are the authors in the book, so it's really good to see you here to join us. We're really appreciative of the work you did to help bring this book to bear. Some people might mention that, wondering what a book of case studies is, what's its worth. It's a kind of different book. In fact, I tried to get away with not writing a regular chapter at all, but the publisher wouldn't let us do that. We had to have a couple of regular chapters to introduce the whole book to get it through. So made it a bit of extra work. So it was good, though. I'm glad that the publisher did that, because it made us have to think even more about why, what's the utility of case studies? Why publish them, and what can we do with them, and what does it mean for becoming more ethical, like growing in your ethicality, fine-tuning that antenna, which is a word I like to use a lot. So it seems that case studies are something that is of great interest to a lot of people, not just coaches, but generally speaking, about the situations you come across in life and how you might what it looks like for other people, how it might resonate for you, and give you some things to think about into how you might work with the different scenarios you come across. So today we're just going to quickly introduce ourselves very quickly, primarily for the people who are going to listen to the recording, because everyone else here knows who we are, and we know who most of you are as well. But we're just going to say a couple of words. Let's not make it too academic. It's kind of, what's our name, and give us something a little bit different about ourselves. So I'll start off. So I'm Wendy-Ann, and something new for me, which is actually making me think about life in new ways, is becoming a grandparent. And how would that relate to ethics? I think it just helps me really refine my thinking more about, what is it I want to project onto her, or not project onto her, but what is it that I want to influence with her? What is it about me that's important that I want her to know about, that helps make the world a better place? So there's lots of different things that's coming to my mind just by being a grandparent, and I think that's related to how I show up in the world. Has anyone else got David, Eva, Dumi, or David? Two Davids. How would you?
Can I jump in, because for some reason my computer's not working at the moment. Dumi, can you let people in, please? It's blocked here. It's my computer. It's so sorry about that. And then I can follow, because I'm also a recent grandmother. And as I wrote in the book, so whenever I was invited by you, Wendy-Ann, David, and Dumi to co-edit this book, I've never done this. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brazilian, originally from Rio, currently living in Germany. I'm a coach, and I'm very happy to see many Brazilian friends joining us today, some of whom do not belong to the world of coaching, Yay. But I'm in the academic world and do know the value of case studies. Anyway, when I was invited, I was so thrilled. And it's a bit of cliche saying, oh, I felt so thrilled and honored and humbled. But it's true. I felt humbled, really humbled, and say, gosh, can I do this? And then, like you, Wendy-Ann, thinking, what kind of role model do I want to be to my granddaughter? And I don't want to shy away from challenges. And I want to show up as someone who says, okay, I can learn to do this. I'll do it. And I'm so grateful for all of your support that needed to be in place for this to happen. So yeah, thank you. Very happy to be here.
Fabulous. Who's next?
Will I go next?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you want to do this? So I'm David Lane. I'm a coach. Something different. Okay, so I'm a West Bromwich Albion football fan. Now, to be a West Bromwich Albion football fan, you have to be able to cope with many, many lows in your life, depression and failure over and over again, with occasional highs, very occasional highs, but a few once a decade. So it kind of is a good way of having to cope, learning how to cope with failure. Now, a high in my life, though, is also with the grandparent team. So I've got 6 grandchildren, and they are definitely a source of high and pleasure, although I don't quite like the fact they refer to me as the granddad who sleeps. However, they do represent a course of great high and pleasure in my life. So that's me, David Lane, West Bromwich Albion fan and coach.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you. And Eva, thank you. Wendy-Ann, yes, my name is Dumisani or Dumi Magadlela. And yeah, I'm human. And so let's just get that out of the way. I am not a robot. I'm not a bot. I bleed real blood, not something else. What robots have inside them? Yeah, something. So I'm based in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I am a citizen of the world. I do not like borders and visas. I think it's a scam. And I think we are all case studies. We just haven't written them up yet. And I love this work that you do, Wendy-Ann, especially you, David. The 2 Davids have been my mentors, one on writing and the other one on team coaching and coaching. So I feel like home here, and I've met Eva. It's been an amazing journey together. And thank you, Wendy-Ann, for pulling us together on this. And everyone else that wrote pieces of this book. This is a gift at this point. In my work with different coaching organizations, I noticed that this is coming more and more into the forefront. And it's great to be here with you to celebrate this milestone. There should be more of these books ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. I suppose I better go last. Go as the last. And I'm David Clutterbuck, and I'm a granddad too. I also have 6 grandchildren, 3 boys and 3 girls. We were laughing just before we started at how the 3 girls persuaded myself and 2 of the dads to be they got out their makeup kits and dressed us in drag for Boxing Day, which was just hilarious. Certainly not the highlight of my life, but certainly the fact that they enjoyed themselves so much was fun. One of my grandsons told me a little while ago, he was going on about old people and how boring old people were, and so his mum said, and granddad, he said, granddad's different. And I loved that. That was really nice. I've got projects which I'm looking at doing this year, which I think has some interesting ethical dilemmas within it. I've got nearly 80 books, nearly loads of articles, you name it. There's words coming out from everywhere, and we're going to put them into an AI. And we can get the AI to with an avatar of me, so people will be able to dial in and ask David a question. But it's not going. It's going to be limited to all of the stuff that we put in. It's a closed AI, and and then it will have an option to go out to evidence-based literature, but it won't be a generalized AI. Assuming we go ahead with this, it's quite a simple job to get it up and running, but it's time consuming. And I'm thinking about, what about the ethics? Okay, so we can make it clear they're not actually talking to me. But how will I imbue the bot? Can I imbue the bot with my thinking patterns? It can come up with the words and its own algorithms, but the way that I might think ethically about an issue, what's the limit here? When, to what extent can it be me and not be me? And I don't know, but I have the concern that there are some significant ethical issues if people dial in and ask for advice on something, and they get a response from the bot, which is basically representing me. That's quite a challenge, and I have no idea where to start on this one at the moment. So there we are. That's take us into a new.
I'm thankful that's your challenge, David.
Of course, the bot might be more intelligent than me.
Well, I'm just wondering what your avatar is going to look like. That might be a nice little telltale about, is it David or is it not? So it's interesting working on a book of case studies. It was slightly different to working on the first book, the Ethical Coach's Handbook, because the content was different. For one, the chapters were longer, and in the Ethical Coach's Handbook. But there were case studies and vignettes throughout that as well. But this one, even with the case studies in it, it was quite a different experience to edit just so many case studies in one go. And curiously, in the first chapter of the Ethical Coach's Handbook, Carrie Arnold and I quoted Robert Biswas-Dino, who mentioned about ethics being, requiring an ethical muscle to going to the gym to build this ethical muscle. And then in the first chapter of this case studies book, where we argued about what, how you might build that muscle. And in fact, case studies is part of that gym that you need to help build your ethical muscle. So it's this is something that's written about, we've spoken about and argued for it. But I'm wondering if any one of you here, the editors that is, and David Lane, if any one of you would like to comment on your experience in working with one, editing the case studies, or in David Lane's case, maybe you want to refer to chapter 2 in some way after Eva or Dumi or David have spoken. So Eva, would you want to make a comment about that?
Will you start, David? David, Dumi, I have some comments, but will you go first?
You go ahead, Eva. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did think I mentioned to you at some point, Wendy-Ann, this was February last year when we did the bulk of the work. We started January and it went on for several months, but the bulk of the work was done in February, editing the cases, reading the cases. And I felt like going to the gym. That was exactly how I felt. And I would read, I was in Rio at that time. And usually I would work in the morning and then I would go out for a walk on Copacabana Beach. Yeah, please be envious, especially those of you who are in the Western Hemisphere right now, like in the sort of Northern Hemisphere right now, it's freezing. Anyway, I would go out and keep on thinking and thinking. what were the implications? And it was like peeling an onion. And I felt that that reflection was so rich that I was, it was like going to a gym. That's exactly how I felt, just sharing. That was the experience.
Fabulous. I'd like to know how we were able to get you off the beach down there to come in and edit cases. I'm not sure I could ever really explain that, but thank you for doing that. Dumi?
Yeah. For me, what I wanted to share, similar to what you said, Eva, for me, it was one thing I loved about this process was the structure. I normally like to dance with emergence, that a structure kind of, I don't like, it feels like a straitjacket, but I enjoy the structure, the layout, what needs to be where, and having someone to pull it together. But on my own journey, I was busy on the other side doing another writing project, which came through late last year. And looking at this work that we did together and the range of cases that were there, and then how the structure pulled it together was the magical part to me. And this is why I say to you, while we're still writing, Wendy-Ann, you have this thing of doing the capacity to do that, and I see that with other writers that do that, and it's pulling together from the diversity of it on a very sensitive topic that's topical, where you need to be up to date with the recent things that are happening, and then making it make sense for someone who may not be even a coach. And so for me, that was fascinating. And one thing I've taken from it is that structure has its place, even though you like to dance with images. So I enjoyed that. I love that. And it's a gift of a book. Easy to read too.
Your comments make me want to ask you about how you feel structure may or may not help you understand an ethical dilemma.
Ooh. The things, laws are, what are they? Are ethical guidelines in a sense. And when you have a project like this, of a book with a timeline, a deadline, there is an ethical responsibility to stick to that deadline. And what structure does, it supports efforts towards that. And that is in service of an ethical undertaking in any way. So I enjoyed structure in this particular way. Not always. And I prefer to have the freedom to dance a little bit, even if the tune changes, and keep to the rhythm of it. And this one was a very, very, very beautiful dance.
Oh, that's a nice comment to make. Thank you. I'm glad that was your experience of it. It wasn't always my experience when I was working on the first chapter, I can tell you. But I'm glad you've had that experience. David Clutterbuck, you got some comments to say?
Yeah, sure. I've done quite a few books of case studies over the years, but this is the first time that we've actually looked in depth at how do you use a case study? What's the value of a case study? We always just assumed people want case studies, and this time we stepped back and we said, well, why is case studies so useful in learning, particularly in this context? What is the mechanism by which case studies help us to reflect and to learn and to grow our ethic ability? Which is, was it Roger Steer? The word ethic ability, I think, yeah.
Ethicality.
Ethic ability, yeah. But and I think the focus on the way that we use case studies and how we can actually extract more value from them, by being really reflective and putting and it's certainly made me reflect in using case studies since we started the project, on how I draw meaning from other case studies, whether they're big written, full written case studies like this, or whether they're simple case studies that are brought to me in supervision, where somebody spends 5 or 10 minutes explaining a case to me and to me and to the group, and we then start to pull meaning out of that experience. And when you read a textbook, you get the same, typically you get the same story as you read it through. When you read a case study, it's a bit like a piece of art. You see different things in the picture. And so when you read a really good case study, you notice different things as you go along. So the texture changes. And therefore I think it's there's probably a book in how to learn from case studies, but I haven't got that on my list.
You know what I think's interesting about case studies, as I'm listening to you, David, is the fact that the author tells the story, and so you're reading the story and then trying to understand it. But I think then also, are we reflecting on the assumptions that we're making that are in this, that we think are in the story?
Yeah.
Because the story doesn't have every element of what's required to fully understand it. There's nuances that are missing. And what assumptions are we making, and how is that influencing the decisions we might make?
Just like looking at a picture.
Yeah.
You see in the picture is more about you than what the artist put in there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. David Lane.
Okay, so obviously case studies have a very long history in all sorts of fields. You know, in medicine, case studies are really important. In business, they're used extensively in business schools to teach ideas. So they're kind of extensive use. Apart from using them as specific teaching tools, here is a way to illustrate something. The other kind of key thing they bring, of course, has done it. You think, now I wouldn't have done it that way. What's that about? So it's a kind of challenge, but it's also a source of new ideas. So they're kind of really interesting to read. And as Wendy-Ann said, there's a story there, and you're trying to unpick the story. And kind of like when you're actually coaching, you come with your ideas, the client comes with their ideas, and somehow between you, you're trying to co-create a story. What's going on here? How might this story change? What could be done differently? So that process of kind of storytelling and unpicking the story is very prevalent in case studies, but also very real in case studies, because this is what has actually happened. And so it has that kind of extra value to you. It's not a theoretical account. It's no, this is somebody's pain, or this is somebody's pleasure, or this is somebody's intent, etc. But how do you actually make sense of the case stories? So you can read them and say, well, what's the story, and try to unpick it. But there are other ways of thinking about case studies. One way is through the use of formulation, which is a chapter Wendy, Michael Cavan and I wrote. And case formulation is a potential way. It's only one potential way. So we're not pushing formulations the only way to look at case studies, but it is one particular way, because what it does is case formulation enables you to think in very particular ways about, so what's going on in this? What's going on in this? What's the purpose they're trying to achieve here? What perspectives are they beginning to bring? So what is the coach bringing as a perspective? What's the client bringing as a perspective? How are they trying to make sense of their world? And also, what process are they using to try to make sense of the world? And so case formulation is a way of doing that. And there are many different ways of doing case formulation. So there's models from arts practice, the famous theoretician of theatre, Stanislavski, his framework for looking at art, drama and theatre performance is a potential way you can look at it. There's models from existential thinking of how to look at it. There's models from narrative thinking. There's models from empirical evidence-based approaches that to enable you to think, this is how I can look at this case study and begin to make sense of the story they're trying to tell. So we do offer in the book one case formulation as one mechanism by which you can think about case studies and try to make sense of them. But in essence, what you're doing is trying to understand the story and try to hear what is being said by coach and client or team or whatever form of case study it is. So I've always loved reading case studies as a real opportunity to learn new things. And so, you know, I've really looked forward to reading the rest of the book. Obviously, I've had a read of some of the book, but I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of the book when it arrives.
Have you all received a copy
Yeah.
yet or not?
No.
Oh, really? You have? Look at
Oh,
that.
you've all got just
Harold's got it. Nicole's got it. I've got it. Okay. Oh, yeah, see, there's people up there in the crowd there who've got
Yeah.
it as well. Well, David, I think we need to do something about that for you. It's
Yeah.
case studies are interesting because my first venture into them was through my psych work and how we would pull the cases apart. And I'm really happy that we've got that in this book within the ethics field, that we have a way of pulling apart and understanding the stories. So thank you, David, for leading that off in that chapter. In chapter 1, David Clutterbuck, because we have two Davids, I got a name, David Clutterbuck and I wrote about how we might build ethicality, and we looked at the development of ethicality from childhood through to adulthood and the different models that different theorists have put forward. And in reviewing the chapter, as I asked David Lane to review the chapter before we send it off to the publisher, and he gave me a wonderful piece of information that has stuck with me ever since, and I'm so glad he did, because it's actually a really important piece of information that's included in that chapter, and it's about tensions, the tensions that we hold when we're looking at different scenarios and understanding what those tensions are. Has anyone actually read chapter 1 that can tell us what those tensions are? Between the tension between observing, reflecting, and actually doing something. And the other tension is between what you know, what you think, and what you're feeling. So in all the case studies that you will look at, it's good to have a look at what's going on for you in relation to those the two tensions there, and identify them. And the more you do that, the more attuned you become to the different points of concern or challenges that you need to be thinking about. It just heightens. It's like that's what's fine-tuning your ethical antenna. And I think the tensions that were written about by David Cobb, I believe, if I remember correctly. I'm still suffering a bit of jet lag here.
David Kolb.
Yeah, David Cobb, K-O-L-B. And that's a really good, I think, piece of information for you to hold in a very simplistic way to reflect on, and let that continue to build inside yourself to build your awareness. So anyone here in the audience, I want to give you a couple of minutes to think of a very short little case study that someone in the audience, maybe one of the authors in the book, can give us a very short little case study that we can discuss, all of us, and pull apart and see what we come up with. And while you're doing that, all of us who have a glass of wine with us can go, cheers.
I'll get mine.
Eva's going to get hers. So is anyone going to put their hand up to give us a small case study? Or do I have to think of one? I have a few. I've been talking about a few over the last 12 months, but it'd be good to get someone else's to get us to have a think about. Okay. You ready, Eva?
Yes.
Fabulous. So cheers, everyone. Thank you, all the authors and all the editing team, and David, who was also an author in the chapter. So cheers, and have a drink up wet your mouth a bit, ready for the next half hour. No bubbles for me tonight. I need a bit of warmth and comfort of red wine.
This is so different from the traditional old-fashioned book launch, where the publisher would get people together and they would pay for all the drinks.
You know what, though, David? The way we're doing it nowadays, or at least the book launches that I've had over the last couple of years, doing them virtually, we can get an audience much broader from further away than doing it at some university somewhere stuck in one country at one university, a smaller population. So I think
and you can engage with everybody so much more than you can at a traditional formal book launch.
Yeah.
So I think this is I far prefer
Yeah.
this approach.
Yeah. Oh, has anyone got a case study, or any of the editors? You got a case study? I'm being a bit lazy, I know, but you know, it's been a tough day.
I can give you a brief one if you want.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Mary's a 54-year-old woman from an Asian background. Her family have asked you to coach her because she's underperforming in her work as an accountant in the family firm. She's from a very traditional background. So where are you going to start?
Yeah. Good question. Where are you going to start? The family's asked you to coach her. So, Dumi?
Oh, I thought we were going to throw it to the audience and involve them.
Yeah,
They're too
let's do it.
quiet.
Well, we can.
Yes,
when
let's do it.
Yeah, yeah, and then let's be more interactive. Jez, you there? I see you. Hilda,
You can
Dulce.
take yourself off mute and come in and
Yes, let's get
that
everyone
is right.
involved. There's so much expertise here. Lati is there. Go ahead. I see your hand.
I think when in that specific situation, it would to be very important to make very clear to the company that you are willing to coach anyone who's in agreement, and part of contracting within coaching would require the party that's going to undergo the process to be in agreement with that. And before any contracting or any agreement can be come to, it would be very, very important for you to speak to the daughter and for you to find out whether it's a process that she's willing to kind of go through, and really suss out whether it's something that you'd like to end into, but also upfront before any contracting takes place, helping them understand the coaching frame and confidentiality within that, the limitations within what their potential expectations and outcomes could potentially be, and the ramifications of any changes that she might make that might rub up against them, and the potential secondary, tertiary, and quarantary effects of what, especially if you're doing deep transformation coaching, could have on them. And the bag that holds all of that is ecology, of really checking that they understand all of those things, and grinding that out before you even speak to the daughter. Because going into it where they do not understand, they haven't had a chance to really think it through, would not be wise, especially when there's a lot of cultural context. Because when it comes to very strong cultures, it's so deeply subconsciously wired into individuals, they're not even aware of what programs they're running. And that's when it becomes a problem, because at least if something is conscious, people can think, oh, I do tend to do that. And then it's not a problem because they're aware of it.
Nice.
That unconscious and unconscious contracting is a really interesting topic. And there's a whole chapter on that by Pam McLean in the Ethical Coach's Handbook. So it's a very good read.
I'm going to be controversial at this point and say I think it's the wrong question. And the assumption is that the issue is with the individual rather than the system. And the ethics of the system, or the ethical issues, relate to how we view the system and how we engage the system and so it's coaching the system rather than coaching the individual. The ethical dilemma becomes one of how narrow and how broad. do we see the intervention that we should take?
Does anyone else want to make comment?
Eva, you're
don't see it.
muted. Still muted.
Oh.
I think that was for Portuguese for old bother.
Steve, what would you like to
And
share?
you think, going back to David's point about systems, of course, you've got very different systems operating here. You've got the system, the family, and system, the business, and system, the family business.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's hear what Svea has to say. Thanks, David.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure if I was breathing out and missed a piece of information. It could have been, it's been a long day, but I'm curious about why. Okay, unless I missed it, my starting point would be, and I'll use Dumi, your conscious greeting. I would be asking what is it about me and how have they come to me and why am I being asked this and who are they and who are we here? So I might have missed that piece of information, but I'm just struck by that is the way we want to tell them things rather than listen to what they have to say about their good reasons for why they've made this choice and why they've made this approach. And that isn't the same as telling me all the story about all these different layers of people and systems. And I agree with David Clutterbuck about all these different, arrangements going on, choreographies going on. So I wasn't sure if that was posed, because for me, the question always is people must have had a good reason for asking for this. And do I have any sense of what their good reason is for wanting this before I start speaking about this rather than about who am I and who are they? And how did this come about that they found me?
What I find really interesting is when we start delving into these discussions and when we're delivered an ethical dilemma, is that we're immediately looking at the story before we've even looked at where's the tension in this for me? What's going on? What's alerting me to there's something going on here that I have to be looking at? So I would say before we start pulling apart the story, we've got to be understanding the tensions that's going on. Yes, Carol?
I was thinking very much of what does it trigger in me and what are the parallel process? And how would I feel as the daughter? So yeah, those things, it's really contracting, but that's quite a big process. And as David Clutterbuck said about the system, some of the things you learn about systemic team coaching, it seems to me this is much more about a family system and on top of that, an organisation. So you've actually got the two things that may not actually be working in the same direction. So that whole thing of the different systems that are in it, and I need time to think, and I also would want to talk to other stakeholders before I decided to take it on. So I think the agreement with the people who've requested it, the family member that's requested it, would be, and how do you feel about me just asking, doing some interviewing of people beforehand to collect information. But I think last speaker's view of, why have they chosen me? That'd be interesting. Is it that I'm less expensive than others? Is it that somebody's recommended me? Just where does that come from? And have they tried this before? That's the other question I often ask,
There's also something behind any case study, corporate case study, whether it's a small business or a big business. What is the ethical climate in this organization? Because that with the ethical climate will influence the ethical behavior of people within the organization. We brought out a book last year on coaching in a politicized environment. I forget the exact title, but we done some work. I'd done some work with a bank looking at some of these issues, and we gave them the survey to how politically, where are you on a scale of politically astute but authentic to basically psychotic? And the horrifying thing was that the majority of people but were well towards the manipulative, unethical end, even though the bank had all these statements and things that by the way it react, when they actually talked about how they viewed politicized issues, the majority of them were on that were in an environment basically where it was difficult to be ethical because the political environment poisoned it. And that's quite that's so the context is equally important. It's not just the individuals that are involved, it's the context in which they operate.
Part of that context is culture. Through what lens are we making these assumptions and determinations, and what is that giving us in relation to the tensions? The fact that, you know, I'm Australian, living in Paris, but we're talking about an Asian family.
And being Asian is so multifaceted. Which Asian part? Is it in India? Is it in Singapore? Is it Japan? Is it in China? What's Asian? I mean, what would that piece of intel add to the dynamic ethically? So what are the lenses which we're looking at anything ethical? What do we pay attention to first, right up front? And I like what you said, Wendy-Ann, around what's the tension? What's the hook? What is that thing that says something needs attention here? What is it in that family, David Lane, that said, maybe we can come back to you on this, around what is the tension point from what Wendy-Ann asked? I was curious to hear more on that.
Fiona, did you want to share something?
Yes, just briefly. I was aware listening to you, David, that I thought, oh my goodness, what would I feel like if I heard through the grapevine that my father or mother had wanted me to be fixed and to do a better job? And I thought I'd be furious. And that led me to thinking about the family dynamic. You know, I'm an ex-family therapist myself. I thought, oh my goodness, this is a can of worms. And so I would want to stand back and notice my own bodily response to this request, and then start to see the bigger picture, as the other David said. It's so important to actually, first of all, in my work, first of all, what goes on for me in this chest, this heart, this body that might be giving me data, and then I want to step right back and, as it were, view from the balcony. So that was what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and you know, I want to ask everyone here, who's feeling some level of frustration that you're not getting answers from us? That you're not getting this, oh, you need to do X, Y, Z. You don't have to admit to it, but I know it's out there in some fashion with some people. It's been happening quite a while.
They're being nice. It's just being nice.
Can I, when you asked if there was, if we could also bring a case from the book, since the authors, if the authors were not presenting, so can I bring a different case from the book? And very briefly, just and thinking of David's project for this year and the avatar, and what just happened here when David just says, I think we've got the wrong question, and started a completely different conversation on the system. So one of the cases is the coach is coaching through a platform where all the data from the client is stored. And the client uses that platform to take their own notes. And there is a data breach. And one morning, the coach wakes up and there are hundreds of email in their inbox, including from that client saying, what you're going to do. So just going to the point of not really able to give black and white responses here, are we? but to think what is involved and ethically, and how would you prepare for this? Each one of us. So that's another case that came to me, especially David. I'm thinking of you. I know you love challenges, but wow, that's a big one.
Indeed. Yes.
No
And
avatar is going to replace your questions.
It's not theoretical. It's real. It's there. The majority of the storage of data is, even if it's a coaching platform, it's, you know, the encryption, the potential to have that breached is very high. But if you just take it down at a separate level, you know, what's on your computer? What have you stored about your clients? And how secure is that? The individual coach working at home doesn't have access to encryption methods or sophisticated methods. If somebody wanted to go into your computer and dig out information, and they were determined enough, they could do it. So, you know, what does that mean? Where do we store the data to make it really safe? I don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
Where and how? David, Dumi suggested perhaps you might have a comment, David Lane that is, might have a comment about your own case study that you might like to add.
Yeah. Okay. I can actually tell you what ChatGTP would say. Because I put it into ChatGTP.
Let's go with it.
Oh.
I'm going to ChatGTP now to work out my ethical dilemmas. Let's go.
Okay.
I've got to hear your David Lane. What was your prompt to putting it into ChatGPT? I have to hear that.
My prompt, well, puzzling out. Okay, what's the future of coaching look like? Okay, so if we're all going to develop AI-based coaches and avatars, etc., what sort of coaching might you get? So sticking this, and I'll put this one in because it's essentially a case I worked on.
Okay.
So, you know, so I put it in. And what ChatGTP has to say is pretty much entirely different from what you've all been saying. Okay, so ChatGTP is very structured. It says, first, build a relationship. Okay. Second, be culturally sensitive. Third, identify goals and expectations. Fourth, assess skills and challenges. 5, develop open and honest communication. 6, develop a personalized development plan. 7, provide skill developments and opportunities. 8, do regular check-ins. Now, note we haven't even mentioned all the dilemmas you've all been talking about.
It's gone
It's
straight
kind of like
into-
straight in, get at it.
Yeah, I think Lachi at the beginning mentioned that some of those that you started with in that building the relationship.
Yeah.
That. But yeah, that's interesting, fascinating.
So the case studies in the book are a lot more sophisticated than ChatGPT suggests.
Well, that's nice. Nice to know.
There's something here about nuance and subtlety.
Yeah.
that I'm not sure I really understand yet whether AI can actually engage in that level of thinking of meaning and subtlety. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
AI cannot do wisdom or judgment.
Yeah. And also going back to the question that was raised, you know, okay, who is me? Who is this coach that this family's approached and kind of why? So here is this Asian family and they're asking me, a white male, to coach a female member of the family. There's a whole bunch of dilemmas in there to start with. And, you know, where does that come from? And the question is asked, well, have they tried this before? Yes, they have, but they sent her to therapy before. To sort herself out. And that didn't work. So now they've asked for a coach. Well, why me? Because actually, I don't know anyone in the community. There's a shame issue here.
I have a suspicion that the client is the only sane person in the story.
It's just too tempting. Maybe you should offer to buy the business and sort it out that way.
I mean, I know what I said was a joke, but actually, it's one perspective. She could be the only person who's got her act together and knows what's needed to be be and the family, the weight of the family tradition and practice and everything else could be the problem, resisting the reality of the world around them.
Yeah, I think about it. She's a professional. She's a trained accountant. Other members of the family may have no professional background, as often the case in family firms, and as often in family firms, as professionalism comes in, all sorts of tensions emerge. Oh, sorry, that's not what grandfather said we were going to do when we set this company up. Why are you kind of going in this other direction? Well, because professionally it makes sense to go in this other direction.
Well, there's the ethical dilemma. Who decides what the problem is?
Yeah.
So the ethics of defining the problem. It depends on the perspective, on your perspective. But if you go along with the definition of the problem of one audience without considering from the perspectives of others, I would suggest that is a potential breach of ethical principles.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Jenny, you'd like to say something? You got your hand up?
Yeah, sure. I'm just diving into this and have been listening, but also had a phone call during your explanation of the case, so I may have missed something. But anyhow, for me, I notice that so many of you say that you would work with yourself, but I would actually not at all want to do that. I would really work with my curiosity. There are so many things I don't know about this situation. Maybe because I didn't hear the case. But I'm like, I don't know anything. It's how old is she? What is happening here? Is she 8 years old? Or is she 30? Or there's so many things we don't know. And when it comes to making a discernment ethical, I have so many questions for this family before I say anything.
Yeah, so the tension for you is, and tell me if I'm wrong, the tension for you is between what you know and what you know and what you're feeling about the case.
Well, I would like to not go too much into that in my own thoughts before I've heard them at all. That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
And because there is so much we don't know, and that's where would like to start.
Yeah, and I guess when I'm talking about the tensions, it's not about you having to dig so deep into yourself about that, but it's about recognizing that arises in you, which tells you that's something you need to go and find more information. It doesn't sit well with you in some way. You need to go and investigate more, use your curiosity. So you knowing more about yourself is going to help drive that.
Agree on that, definitely.
Yeah, and that's what's coming.
And what I think is that whatever my tension is saying me, that could actually, in whatever it says, it will give me some confirmation bias in there. And that is a really ethical dilemma in this situation, that I will sit on a tension and take too much responsibility, but maybe think about it too much when meeting the family or this daughter or the situation.
And I think for me, there's a limit that this illustrates the limitations of a book of case studies that we've been able to produce. There's so much learning from these case studies, but each of these case studies represents a situation where the coach or the author has felt a level of ethical discomfort and addressed it. But what about all those things, those ethical issues and dilemmas there, which we haven't noticed?
Exactly.
And we have no way of capturing those, but everything that we've said so far on this last hour illustrates the fact that these ethical dilemmas are constantly around us, and they're popping up and going away, but they are far more numerous and than we recognize, and we may choose not to see them, or we may simply not see them out of ignorance. But everywhere we look, there are ethical dilemmas. And to what extent do we actually want to recognize all of them? Because it probably would drive us nuts. But there is a balance here. So what we're recognizing and learning from is those that we are prepared to bring to allow into our attention, our consciousness.
Love that. And the framework we can use in that is range. It's a Gestalt term, the range. What is the coach's ethical range? What is the client's ethical range? What is the systemic ethical range that you're coming into? And your range will determine what you pay attention to, what you consider an ethical dilemma or an ethical issue that needs attention. And our range is different. And we need to accept that as we go into the system. I love what you said there, David Clutterbuck.
But also recognize that we can grow that it's not that it moves. And the things that we engage in to build our awareness, like being aware of the tensions, helps us grow that. And that's what's the important point about that. So we're on the hour.
And let me just add something from this discussion. Quoting you, Wendy-Ann, when I first met you, you said, my goal is to make ethics something sexy. So I think we had a very sexy discussion here. Thank you for that.
Brilliant.
Oh, thank you so much. Someone's actually gave us a bit of feedback that they didn't like that word sexy being used in connection with ethics. And I thought that was rather sad. So it's kudos to you for bringing it up and reaffirming it for me tonight. So, thank you, everyone.
Here in England, people get confused between ethics and Essex.
Very different, David. Very different. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for all coming. And
wrap up on the hour. Yeah. Has anyone got any of the editors or David Lane got any last words to say as we close this off?
I'll jump in quickly. Once you start reading these case studies, you can't finish it. I picked it up and my wife said, you got to come to bed. You got a meeting tomorrow morning. I was like, just jumping into them. Like Eva said, very sexy, exciting case studies. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
I thank you very much. Great to have you here.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. Fantastic session.
Thanks a lot. Bye.